Shalom Alechem, Assalamu Alaikum. Welcome to Ezra Chapter 4, in which there are 24 verses, beginning in verse 2. It says here, "We will build with you," versus "let us build with you." The footnote reads "let us," so it does seem they're asking for permission, although it is possible that they were being assertive and imposing their their will that we will build with you. We're not taking no for an answer. Verse 4. It is not for us and you. Okay, I think it's verse 5. Or is it verse 3? Okay, it's verse 3. All right, let me make a correction here. It is not for us and you to build a house to our Elohim. Versus, you have nothing to do with us to build a house unto our Elohim. So the first answer is more diplomatic. If I could paraphrase it, take some artistic liberties here. We cannot rebuild it together. It is our responsibility. Thanks, but no thanks. Second answer, you have no business here. Get out of here. You're not chosen. You're not the chosen people. Okay, so it's interesting that these people who used to afflict Judah and Benjamin, obviously they're not of the house of Israel. They're not any of the 12 tribes. They seem to be antagonistic. They did afflict them at one point, but these groups of people are not identified by name or by nation or anything like that. We have no idea who they are, simply that they are antagonistic. So it's speculation as to who they are, unless it's revealed in the text. And then it says here, they hindered them versus troubled them. That's in verse 4. Hindered them in building, so they prevented them, versus troubling them, which means to simply make them afraid. Let's leave it at that. Verse 5, an omission of plotting to frustrate their purpose or their counsel, versus just frustrate them. So this was clearly premeditated. They're hindering their building and frustrating them specifically. This was not a spur of the moment decision. They did this far in advance. Verse 6, we have a letter being described. A letter was written versus an accusation. So it's a formal written document. Verse 7, it describes or identifies rather Tabil, who wrote peaceably to Mithridates, versus wrote Bishlam Mithridath Tabil. So he wrote peaceably. Seems to be the proper rendition. Bishlam is an individual named Bishlam. So did he write peaceably? Seems so, but unless this is a wrong interpretation, this is the name of a person. Okay, there's an omission of the tribute gatherer, and this individual is mentioned multiple times in this chapter, in the Septuagint only. So who is that? The person reading the letter, we're going to find out. Spoiler alert. Verse 9, an omission of thus has judged. So this is their judgment, speaking to or talking about all these individuals, all these groups that judged such and such, they're going to say. And there's an omission, I should say not really an omission, there's an addition of the Elamites, and the Masoretic. So that is verse 7. Verse 10, significant difference. It talks about this side of the river versus beyond the river. So notice actually it does say beyond in the Septuagint in verse 10. versus this side in the Masoretic. So I have it actually reversed. Have it in reverse. So it's beyond versus this side. So are they on this side or are they beyond? We're going to find out. Here it says beyond again, so it's a continuous difference. So they are not on this side of the river. They are beyond the river, not on the same side at all. And it says here, this is the purport of the letter versus the copy of the letter in verse 11. Verse 13, referring to the walls completed versus set up. So it's one thing to set up a wall to be built, and it's another thing altogether when it's finished and, well, it's fortified. You have to deal with that wall now. Verse 14, an addition of now because we have maintenance from the king's palace. Significant difference in the same verse. It is not lawful for us to see the dishonor of the king versus it was not meet for us. So the Septuagint is detailing that it is not lawful, perhaps even they could be executed if they breach this law, versus it is not fitting or it's not becoming, it's not appropriate for us to see the king's dishonor. So those are two significantly different situations. One, saying this is illegal, we could suffer the death penalty, versus, oh, it's just not appropriate. It's inappropriate. I mean, these are levels of seriousness. One, life and death, and one that's simply, oh, it's inconvenient, it's inappropriate. It's not, not the custom. And it says here in verse 14, we sent and made known the matter to the king. So they made him know this. They disseminated this message. They communicated the message versus they certified it. Okay, we put our stamp of approval. This is a valid letter and it's authenticated. So that doesn't make as much sense, in my opinion. Verse 15, talking about the land of Jerusalem, how they did some research and investigated into this city and its history, and they concluded the following: in the midst of it, from very old time, long time ago, refuges or refugees perhaps, for runaway slaves, versus they have moved sedition within. Two wildly different things. One is saying they used to be slaves and they ran away. So it's a call back, hearkening back to the fact that these people were slaves for hundreds of years in Egypt and they were freed. They're runaway slaves, versus they are rebellious people who cause sedition, uprisings, and so on. That's significantly different as well. So I'm going to add that. Versus this city has been made desolate versus destroyed. Okay, it's not too different there. Verse 16, declare to the king versus certify again. So they're declaring, they're making known, they're making it public, they are communicating this clearly. Footnote reads, desertions of slaves take place in it. Okay, I think that this is in reference to the previous verse. So let's just review that so we can understand how they arrived to this footnote. So again, in the Septuagint, these are, in ancient times, refugees who are runaway slaves, versus they caused rebellions and uprisings. So the footnote reads, desertions of slaves take place in it. So it could be one of two options, that these people cause slaves to be freed. So they are the ones freeing slaves, which doesn't make sense. They've never done that in their history as far as I'm concerned. I don't remember that the Israelites freed slaves. They are the ones who are the freed slaves. So these are slaves who deserted wherever they were serving, and they live in that place. They lived in that place. So that was what they had gathered from their investigations. Okay, verse 16. This is a pretty big difference. It's at least a significant difference. This is their deduction. If the walls are set up, if they're complete, and the city is built, they say this to the king: Thou shalt not have peace. Thou shalt not have peace. What does it say in the Masoretic? Thou shalt have no portion on this side the river. Okay, which one actually makes more sense? Well, let's look at the Masoretic first, just to see, does that even make sense? Well, no, he's the king of Persia, most powerful person in that side of the map. He can literally simply take over, conquer whatever portion of land he wants. No one's going to stop him. And if they try, it's futile. On the other hand, when we read this very bold statement, thou shalt not have peace, having peace, keeping peace, and not having peace, that's not a simple affair. That's not something you can simply stamp out or conquer. That is something that is more realistic, that makes sense. It's logical. But to believe that they can prevent him from having any portion uh, that he would like to have, no, it's unrealistic. He could simply take whatever he would like to take. Who is this people speaking, though? That is the big question. Verse 17. He says verses, and at such a time. That's a continuous difference. We're going to look into that right now. It says, this is I believe it's a Hebrew idiom, and it comes from the Aramaic kaheneth. So this is Aramaic kaheth. It means now and now. In the English, it's thus and so forth, at such a time. It could mean time. Um, so that's an interesting idiom. I'm not sure if this is related to Esther. Will this be used in Esther as well? And will it apply? Because it doesn't seem to apply in the Septuagint. Simply says, he says. Verse 18, we see again the tribute gatherer is identified as a distinct individual, not simply a letter. There's somebody reading the letter. Whom you sent versus which you sent. So the focus is on this person, whom versus which. So the letter in the Masoretic has been called before me. So this, again, this tribute gatherer is reading the letter versus been plainly read before me. Verse 19, exalts versus insurrection. Let me see, desertion versus sedition. So I think what they're doing here is that they're taking these claims, these accusations that they are not only runaway slaves, but they also exalt themselves against kings. Because how else could they leave, like Egypt? They didn't say Egypt, but how can they desert a great kingdom that they were once serving unless they, human nature and logic would deduce that, okay, they exalted themselves, somehow they rebelled, obviously, and they deserted. Well, yeah, they did desert where they came from, but little do they know this happened through supernatural means, not simple human actions or exaltation or rebellion. This is a liberation done through miraculous means, through Yah, Elohim of Israel, through a strong hand. So that's verse 19. And then it just says, let me just simplify it. There are three distinct words being used in the Masoretic, or the Septuagint rather. Those words are exalt, exaltation, rebellion, and desertion. So three distinct words or actions: exalting oneself, so becoming arrogant, lifting yourself up, versus as well as rebellion. On top of that, revolution, dissent, mutiny, and desertion, leaving. In the Masoretic, we have three words that essentially mean the same thing: insurrection, rebellion, and sedition. They're all rather similar. And just to be sure, I want to make sure that I'm getting these words clear. I'm pretty sure insurrection and rebellion mean the same thing. Sedition, revolt, yeah, the same thing, rebellion. So why would they repeat it three times? It's redundant, isn't it? Verse 21, it says, there's an addition of until another commandment shall be given from me. This is a really interesting statement because the king is essentially canceling what he just says. Why would he preempt what he's saying here? Let's read it. Now, therefore, make a decree to stop the work of those men, and that city shall no more be built. So that is a standing order. In the Masoretic, it's somewhat wishy washy. Give you now commandment to cause these men to cease. So stop the work, the city be not built or builded until another commandment shall be given from me. So it's not exactly solid, no pun intended, like a solid foundation. So that's verse 21. And then we see in verse 23, again, the tribute gatherer is mentioned versus the copy of the letter. And it describes how they rushed to Jerusalem and they went through Judah, the land of Judah, versus they went to the Jews, which they themselves are technically Israelites and perhaps even Jewish. And then it says, and caused them to cease. So they stopped the work of building the wall of the city. How? With horses and an armed force. So they brought, I don't know where they got the army from, but they have horses and armies, forces. In the Masoretic, it reads, they also stopped them, but not by the same means, by force. Although, just to be fair, this is inserted. So the interpretation is these are soldiers. So by force and power, those are redundant. So it is more specific in the Septuagint. So that's all for this chapter. Chapter 4, thank you very much for your time. Until next time, I bid you all Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you, and Maranatha.